That morning, Mrs. Evelyn didn't just find a number. She found a betrayal. For 20 years, she had loved and trusted her daughter-in-law as if she were her own daughter. Only for $200,000 of her late husband's inheritance, the last remaining trust and security she had, to vanish without a trace with a single click. But this is not just a story about a financial theft. It's the story of a family falling apart. It's the painful journey of a mother, betrayed by her own flesh and blood, learning to rise from the ashes, fighting through despair, and reclaiming her dignity. Not with violence or loud lawsuits, but with steel resolve and intelligence. Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below. My name is Evelyn Miller. I'm 67 years old. And what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. Sunday morning. Winter sunlight slipped through the curtains, falling onto the kitchen table in a pale, cold streak. The house was so quiet. I could hear the hum of the air conditioner and the faint click of a spoon against a coffee cup. As I had done every Sunday since my husband died, I opened the banking app to look at the number that always gave me a sense of safety. The savings account. Our final cushion, he used to call it. The screen lit up, spun, then froze. Checking account, normal. Savings account, nearly empty. I blinked, logged out, logged in again, refreshed the page. The numbers stayed cold. I took a deep breath and scrolled to the transaction history. A long list of small transfers. 50, 120, 200, every single day. The same recipient's name, stamped again and again like a seal, pressed into the same spot on paper. Melissa Miller. I set the cup down, afraid my hands might drop it. Melissa, my daughter-in-law. The girl who hugged me at the funeral, promising, "You can always count on us, Mom." The girl who cried in the kitchen over a burnt pie, who called me Mom so gently. Now her name stood in the middle of the screen like the signature on a clean, professional theft. I scrolled to the bottom. One final transfer, sharp and deliberate. $200,000, my husband's life insurance, the sum two old people had saved piece by piece through decades. The kitchen was still quiet, but the quiet changed color. It thickened, as if something in the air was about to explode. I remembered last week when Ryan stopped by to update the app for me. He smiled. "Don't look, Mom. I'll set a new password that's easier to remember." I turned away. Trust, reflexive, automatic. I didn't realize I was opening the door for someone to step straight into the rest of my life. I tried to call Ryan. My finger hovered over the green button. I could already hear it. "Mom, you must be mistaken. You're confused. Let us explain." I put the phone down. I didn't need a performance. I needed the truth. I took out the worn brown leather notebook and began writing. Date, time, amount, recipient. Each line pulled me out of shock, back toward clarity. The small withdrawals spread out like pinpricks. In the last 3 days, the rhythm quickened. Someone knew exactly when I was least likely to check. Then the final slash, 200,000, gone on a lonely, sunlit afternoon. I looked at the photo of Ryan at 10 years old, bright smile by the Oregon riverbank, holding up his first fish. The picture suddenly felt heavy, like a verdict. I slid it into a drawer, not to forget, but to stop confusing beautiful memories with an ugly present. The sunlight crept forward, resting on my knuckles. The veins stood out, but my hands no longer shook. I said softly, testing the weight of the words, "Not a mistake. Theft." The kitchen answered with silence, and for the first time, Silence was on my side. I opened the cabinet, pulled out old statements, printed new ones. On the screen, a photo of Melissa, showing off a diamond bracelet in a marble kitchen, captioned with one word: blessed. I looked from the photo to the statement. A straight line connected them. Inside, everything went flat as a countertop. I created a folder on my phone called Evidence, screenshotted every transaction, added notes. Last week, Ryan held the phone. The phrase, "don't look," the time Melissa asked for my account number. The fragments fit together neatly. I heard a faint click in my head. The last door closing. No room left for kind doubt. I stood, checked the front door, turned the lock tight, added the bolt. Not because I feared strangers, because I'd just learned an old lesson in a new way. The ones who hurt you most already know the way in without knocking. In the bedroom, I opened the safe and sorted papers. Marriage certificate, insurance, old will. I slipped in a yellow note: seek legal counsel. One name appeared clearly in my mind: Tom Lewis, 30 years in banking, gentle eyes, and a bone-deep hatred of those who exploit the elderly. Back in the kitchen, I wrote a list for Monday morning. Call Tom, freeze accounts, trace authorizations, change all access info, lock all withdrawal channels, enable two-factor verification, schedule lawyer, review elder financial abuse, record all calls, save emails, keep time logs. By the time I reached the last line, I realized I had stopped trembling. Another rhythm had taken over, the rhythm of a plan. I poured more tea and sat facing the papers, aligned like soldiers on a parade ground. Outside, the bare maple branches struck the window. I remembered my husband's voice. When the season comes, you have to prune deep so the tree can grow strong again. Maybe people are the same. To keep living, you must cut away the trust that's already rotten. I tried to imagine the conversation if Ryan knocked tonight. He would talk about family, sacrifice, temporary hardship. Melissa would lower her eyes, sigh. They would ask me to negotiate in the language of love, then use that very love as a contract. I looked at my list. On the page, there was no word mother, only facts and signatures. My phone buzzed, a group text. Melissa again, another photo. Their kitchen, marble counters shining like mirrors, a glass of red wine beside a bowl of cream soup. I silently counted the day's withdrawals. The symmetry needed no explanation. I stood up and opened the window. Cold air rushed in, thinning the scent of morning coffee. I whispered, loud enough for myself to hear. They think I'm old. They think I won't check. They're wrong. I turned back to the table, gathered the evidence, clipped it into a file. On the cover, I wrote one last line. After this morning, I'll write the rest. I closed the notebook, glanced at what remained on the table. Pen, phone, list. This kitchen once was where I cooked and waited for loved ones to come home. From now on, it was a command center. Before leaving, I paused a moment. There was one sentence that needed to be spoken aloud, like a right. I raised a thief. The words fell into the quiet room, not echoing, but heavy. Heavy enough to make me stand straight, to steady my breath. Within that weight, something small and hard stirred, like a seed. Strength. It had always been there. I'd simply stopped using it. I turned off the kitchen light, letting daylight fade off the tiles. The gentle Sundays I once knew were over. The next part of my life began with one tap on a screen. And, with this decision, I will reclaim what is mine, number by number, inch by inch of respect. There are days when people pay for their own illusions. For me, it was the day I placed the empty jewelry box on the kitchen table and looked at it like an old receipt. That box once held my wedding ring, the only keepsake from my youth I had tried to preserve. I sold it 15 years ago to pay for Ryan's tuition. When I signed the papers, I thought I was trading gold for a future. Now, staring at the hollow inside the box, I know I traded gold for an expensive lesson. I touched the old wooden chair in the kitchen corner. Ryan once urged me to throw it out. "Mom, get a new one. It looks so sad." I didn't, because it was the first thing I bought with my nurse's salary. I kept it, as if holding on to something sturdy would make my sacrifices meaningful. But love, without boundaries, is just an old chair that eventually hurts your back. I glanced at the scraps of my husband's handwriting still taped to the fridge. "Buy milk. Don't forget your pills. Love you, Evie." The ink had faded, but I read them aloud to resist the dense silence filling the house. I wished he were here to see how the good boy had used his mother's password like a key to her safe. By noon, I decided to drive to Ryan and Melissa's house. I told myself it was just a visit, but the truth was, I wanted to look into the eyes of the people who had drained my account, to see if shame still lived there. Their house gleamed, trimmed lawn, white fence, a front door polished like glass. Melissa opened it, holding a Starbucks cup. Surprise flickered, then melted into a sugary smile. "Mom, you should have told us you were coming." I stepped in. The scent of new wood and expensive coffee wrapped around me. Marble countertops, an Italian espresso machine, a fresh set of crystal glasses. On her wrist sparkled a diamond bracelet, the same kind of sparkle I could count in my bank statements. "Beautiful, isn't it?" She beamed, lifting her arm. "Ryan says we've been blessed lately." Blessed? I remembered the line of Melissa Miller repeating across the screen, and the answer sliced through my head like a thin knife. "Your blessing is your mother's loss." Ryan appeared, laptop still open. "Mom, you should have texted first. I'm in a meeting." "I just wanted to see how you two are living," I said, my eyes passing over the $1,000 oak painting on the wall. Melissa chirped about remodeling the kitchen soon. I nodded. "Marble's beautiful, but it scratches easily. Wipe it right away." She laughed, thinking I was giving advice. I only smiled. I rose to leave. Melissa placed a hand on my shoulder. "You should let us take care of you more, Mom. You've done enough." I looked at her long enough for her smile to hesitate. "I don't need anyone to take care of me. I just need people to respect what they've been given." The door closed. A small laugh followed me down the walkway. The laugh, someone who thinks she's won. On the drive home, I didn't turn on the radio. The trees blurred past the window like strokes of whiteout, and my thoughts came into focus. The canceled trips, the winter coat I never bought, the clipped coupons I saved. All lined up, delivering Ryan through doors he now slammed shut behind him. At home, I reopened the statements. The name Melissa Miller marched across the page like a drumline. Tiny stabs of withdrawals, sharp crescendos near the end, and one fatal cut, $200,000, splitting my old age in two. On the next page, I wrote a clean sentence. "Love is not an interest-free bank." When I finished, the tightness in my chest loosened. I gathered Ryan's keepsakes. His framed diploma, a rushed birthday card, a few bright photos. I didn't burn them nor display them. I boxed them, sealed the tape, carried it to the basement. Some things, if kept in sight, will keep collecting interest from your heart. The afternoon passed like a cup of cooling tea. I brewed another and opened my to-do list for tomorrow. Bank, Tom Lewis, freeze accounts, investigate authorizations, change all login credentials, enable two-factor verification. Legal counsel, check elder financial abuse, gather evidence, screenshots, call logs, notes of times Ryan handled my phone. Records, create folder evidence, print statements, handwrite every timestamp. I carefully photographed each transaction, naming every file by date and hour. I remembered exactly when Ryan helped me update the app, his "don't look," and Melissa's text, "Can you send the account number quickly so the accountant can check?" Now the fragments fit. A soft click in my head. The last naive door locked shut. A group text blinked. Melissa again. A photo of the marble kitchen, red wine glass captioned "Blessed." I counted the transactions from that day. No genius required to see their math. At night, I opened the jewelry box again. The hollow inside stared back like a glass eye. I suddenly understood why I'd kept it all these years. Not to wait for the ring's return, but to remind myself that I once willingly cut off a piece of memory to buy my child's dream. But dreams don't pay interest when their owner forgets gratitude. I looked in the mirror. The woman there wasn't as gentle as I remembered. In her eyes was a hard gleam, knife sharp. I recalled my husband's words. When the season comes, you have to prune deep for the tree to heal. Maybe the season had come. Before sleeping, I added one more line beneath the list. I'm not just reclaiming money. I'm reclaiming respect. Then I closed the notebook and turned off the light. The house sank into silence, but not the silence of endurance. It was the silence of someone drawing back a bowstring to let the arrow fly straighter and farther. At dawn, I woke earlier than usual. I brewed coffee and tasted the bitterness. This time, the bitterness didn't frighten me. Bitter meant the tongue still felt, the heart still chose. I buttoned my coat, picked up the folder. Looking around the kitchen one last time, I felt every object stand with me. The old chair, the buy milk note, the strip of sunlight on the table. Together they seemed to whisper, "Go." I stood. 2 quiet words escaped, heavy as a seal. Enough. The door shut behind me, and I knew the price of love had been fully paid. What remained was not revenge, but recovery, not hatred, but discipline. I would walk into that bank not as an outdated old woman, but as the rightful owner of my life's account. In my pocket, the phone buzzed. Ryan's polite message. "Mom, are you free tonight? Can I come over to talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I turned it off. Some conversation should only happen after the truth has been stamped and sealed. I locked the door, tested the handle. Secure. On the doorstep, sunlight slanted across like an underline. I stepped over it, knowing that from this moment on, every sacrifice would have conditions, every love would have a password, and every family would have to relearn the meaning of respect. I drove off, my hands steady on the wheel. The road to the bank stretched open ahead. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what I had given, but about what I would take back. One number, one boundary, one key to my own life at a time. People often say betrayal is a lightning strike. For me, it's a quiet soundtrack, a repeating melody, a steady beat, and by the crescendo, there's nothing left to deny. The next morning, I went to the bank with a thick file in hand. Statements, screenshots, timestamps from when Ryan held my phone. The lobby air was cool, smelling of fresh paper and weak coffee. The receptionist asked what I needed. I simply said, "I need to see whoever handles my account. It's very important." A few minutes later, an inner door opened. A middle-aged man with graying hair, nameplate, Tom Lewis, senior account manager, invited me in. In a small room with frosted glass, I told him everything, from Sunday morning to Melissa's face and the diamond bracelet on her wrist. Tom didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said slowly, "I believe you." Those 3 words tightened my throat. It had been a long time since anyone spoke to me like that. Tom turned the monitor toward me. "Last week there was a call from your number requesting to add a joint authorization to the savings account." My heart skipped a beat. "And the person added was who?" He tapped a few keys. The name appeared clearly on the screen. Ryan Miller. I heard a small crack in my head, the last hinge breaking. I remembered Ryan's voice. "Don't look, Mom. I'll set an easy password." Turns out, he wasn't afraid I'd forget. He was afraid I'd see. Tom continued, "This falls under elder financial abuse. In Oregon, it's a felony." I clasped my hands to stop the shaking. What should I do? "We're going to freeze all access and void the authorization. Then we'll move what remains into a trust in your name. And, if you'd like, I can refer you to Attorney Weber. This is her specialty." I nodded. The procedures were quick and clean. The first paper I signed wasn't to lose, it was to reclaim. As I left, Tom squeezed my hand lightly. "You're not alone." The draft in the lobby felt a little less cold. Back home, I spread the file across the table and drew a red line down the page. Timeline on the left, motive on the right. Left. 10th. Ryan holds phone to update. 11th. ID verification by email. 12th. Authorization added. 13th. First transaction under Melissa's name. 16th. Heavy withdrawals. 17th. $200,000. Right. Convenient, fast, discreet. A clean plan exploiting my blind spot. Family plus technology. The phone buzzed. Ryan called. I let it ring out. A text followed immediately. "Mom, Tom said you froze the accounts. Is there some misunderstanding?" I took a screenshot and saved it in the evidence folder. File name: Feigned Ignorance, 0942. At noon, I pulled out the brown leather notebook and wrote a bold header: Counteroffensive Plan. Under it, 4 lines: verify all authorizations, maintain a call log. Save and print all evidence, photos, messages, statements. Contact Weber, legal framework. Elder, financial abuse. Absolutely no debating over the phone. Silence is armor. When I finished, I felt lighter. Not because the anger was gone, but because it had been sorted into order. I opened my inbox and dug up old emails. Melissa asking me to send the account number. Ryan assuring, "Don't worry, I can handle everything." Words that once felt warm now read like a script. I attached everything to a folder and set a password. This time, I chose it myself, and no one helped. In the afternoon, Tom called to confirm. "Accounts are frozen. Authorization revoked. Your trust is set up and awaiting transfer." His voice was even and certain, like the click of a lock. I looked out the window. Bare maple branches scoring the gray sky. Some things have to be cut down to the root before they can recover. Ryan called a second time. I still didn't answer. Another text arrived. "Who are you listening to? Family doesn't do this to each other." I pressed my lips together. "Family doesn't steal." I didn't reply. I just added a note beneath it. Shifting blame, weaponizing, family. Logged. I sat by the window until dusk bled into the kitchen. Amber light touched the edge of the file labeled Miller. I poured tea. Steam rose, carrying the scent of dry leaves. I remembered my husband saying, "Don't let others teach you your worth by taking what you have." I learned it late, but in time. I added a page titled War Map. Their weaknesses: overconfidence, belief that old age, confusion, belief that family is a hostage. My strengths: evidence, order, allies, Tom, the law. Rules: no emotions on recorded channels, email, text. Everything must have a timestamp. Near goal: preserve the status quo, no verbal communication. Long goal: recover all that can be recovered. Reclaim the respect that must be reclaimed. I taped the war map to the kitchen cabinet. That spot used to hold Ryan's birthday calendar. I wasn't angry taking it down. I just felt the room return to its proper use. Late at night, the window darkened like a curtain falling. I shut the laptop and gathered the papers into a hard folder. On the cover, I wrote in marker, "Miller file, begin." I knew there was more ahead. Lawyers, reports, confrontations. But as the word begin dried, I heard the bolts slide home inside my head. I locked the front door and tested the handle. Solid. Passing the small mirror by the entryway, I caught my own eyes. No longer the look of someone who'd been robbed. Something different. A thin, taut strand pulling my spine straight. Will. Before bed, I sat and wrote 3 short lines. This betrayal wasn't impulsive. It had a schedule, a script, a cast. I won't play the naive mother anymore. Starting tomorrow, every step will leave a legal footprint. I closed the notebook and blew out the small candle on the table. The house fell silent, but not the silence of endurance. It was the silence of someone setting down the pen, then standing up. Before getting into bed, the phone buzzed again. Ryan's message. "Mom, this is just a small misunderstanding. Let me come over and talk." I looked at the screen for a moment, then I set his number to silent, saved a screenshot, and timestamped it. Some conversations should start only after the truth has been sealed. I pulled up the covers. Night wind scraped the eaves like a pencil drawing a straight line. In the dark, I whispered, not to soothe, but to affirm. They think I'm old. They think I forget. They're wrong. And I slept. The first sleep that didn't smell of fear, but tasted of discipline. Tomorrow morning, I will call Weber. I will sign more papers with Tom. I will keep walking the road I should have taken earlier. The road of the keeper of her own keys. They took my money by plan. I will take back myself by plan as well. I learned early that when trust is betrayed, the only thing more valuable than evidence is someone who understands you and stands beside you. Tom Lewis was that person, a banker whose name I hadn't even known before the day we met, yet who now felt like the most reliable neighbor in the world. The first time I met Tom, I arrived with a patchwork folder. Statements, screenshots, handwritten notes. I expected polite sympathy, maybe a referral, then to be shown out with a gentle, "Try to stay calm." Instead, he opened the office door, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "We'll handle this step by step. I'm here with you." I remember the flood of relief that followed. As if, for the first time in days, someone saw my wound and named it for what it was. Not a misunderstanding, not bad luck, but financial abuse. Tom used that phrase like a stone breaking the sealed jar of all the excuses I'd been feeding myself. He explained everything clearly, his voice steady, professional yet warm. And I realized that these procedures weren't complicated matters for the young, but legal rights for every person. Tom guided me through each step, locking down access, freezing the account, verifying authorization history, and most importantly, transferring the remaining funds into a trust. He described a trust as though telling a story. Think of it as a legal box with a key held by a trusted person. Only the permissions defined inside can ever open that box. "I'll help you set up a trust in your name," Tom said. "It will allow only you, or someone you genuinely trust, not those who exploit you, to access it." He outlined the options: revocable versus irrevocable trust, temporary trustees, legal safeguards in case of dispute. Listening to him, I felt the old walls of safety rebuilding, not out of blind hope this time, but law. Tom didn't just know bank policy. He had a personal stance on what had happened. When I asked if he saw cases like mine often, he frowned, a flash of anger in his eyes. "Far too many," he said. "But it should never come from family. For older clients like you, it's not just about losing money. It's about losing the right to be respected." That line struck deep. I felt a small tear slide down, but this one wasn't despair. It was reassurance. The process went faster than I expected. Tom helped me fill out forms, called the bank's legal department, and scheduled a meeting with the attorney he'd mentioned, Ms. Weber. When the documents were ready, he labeled and annotated every section I'd need to follow up on. In his notes, written neatly in italics, he'd added, "Keep all communication. Avoid phone calls if possible. Everything must have a timestamp." And he told me, "They rely on emotion. We rely on records." There was a small moment that showed me Tom was more than just a banker. He handed me a cup of coffee, stood quietly for a moment, and said, "Consider me an ally. When they use the word family as a shield, remember, the law is on your side." I wanted to hug him, but instead, I gripped the cup tighter. I couldn't cry there anymore. I was done crying. It was time to act. Tom went over how the trust transfer would work. He showed me the forms, explained fees, benefits, and how the trust would block any unauthorized withdrawals. You can set withdrawal conditions, review requirements, or mandate third-party approval, he said. I wrote down every word, feeling like I was learning a new language, the language of control. When he handed me the signature line, I signed firmly, each stroke like a seal that couldn't be undone. Evie Carter, settler. After everything was set up, Tom suggested a follow-up plan. "We'll do 3 things," he said. 1. Protect the assets immediately through the trust and freeze. 2. Collect all evidence. We'll supply the statements and call logs. You'll add screenshots and notes. 3. Coordinate with your lawyer to consider civil or criminal action. The way he spoke brought rhythm to chaos, like a song restructured into harmony. Tom went further than required. He called the bank's fraud division and requested a red flag on my profile, banning any account changes without verified legal proof. He sent an internal message to his colleagues. "Case. Miller. Monitor closely. Report all activity to me." That note felt like invisible armor wrapped around my file. When he turned to me, his look said, "They won't touch you again." Leaving the bank, I felt something shift. I was no longer just a lonely mother with private grief. Behind me now stood a small force. Tom's professionalism, Weber's legal preparation ahead, and a tightening circle of law around my case. For the first time in months, I didn't feel abandoned. That night, I reread Tom's handwritten note. "Evelyn, stay calm. Next step, meet with Ms. Weber on Monday. Below it, a thick underline, a promise. I felt myself stepping out of the thin cloak of pain and into another, one woven from knowledge and order. What warmed me most wasn't the paperwork itself. I had long awaited that. But Tom's manner. He didn't pity me. He didn't act as a savior. He stood beside me and said, "We'll do this right." And I answered him with something I thought I'd lost: dignity. On the way home, I stopped at the grocery store, bought a few small things like before. The cashier greeted me with the same old smile. I realized I was re-entering the ordinary world that had once been torn apart, but not as before. I walked straighter, my voice firmer as I paid. I thought of Tom's words: "I hate cases that prey on the elderly." I told myself, so do I. But my hatred had changed form. It had become persistence. It had become a plan. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Tom is an ally. The trust is a shield. I have the law." Then I added, in bold at the bottom of the page, "I lost money. I reclaimed respect." It wasn't a comforting slogan. It was the truth I'd felt as I walked out of the bank. They might take my savings, but they could never take the resolve that rose when I chose to stand. As I drifted to sleep, I pictured Tom. Crisp shirt, calm presence. Not because he was a hero, but because he'd given me something practical and profound. A structure to lean on, a plan to act by, and a reminder that justice isn't out of reach for the old. That night, I slept better. Not because I was fully safe, but because I knew I was no longer alone. And with that ally beside me, I began to believe that fairness could be rebuilt, piece by piece, from the ruins of broken trust. Some sounds aren't loud, yet they make your heart drop a level. That Thursday evening, it was the sound of 3 firm knocks on my door. Heavy, deliberate, like a hammer against the fragile calm I had built. I knew immediately who it was. No one else knocked at this hour. Only Ryan and Melissa, the two who had taken everything from me and now returned as though they were the victims. I opened the door. Ryan stood there, tension carved into his face. Melissa's arms were crossed, her eyes sharp as polished steel. No. "Hi, Mom." No smiles. Just a thick silence between 3 people who once called each other family. "What are you trying to do, Mom?" Ryan began, his voice no longer the one I remembered. "You froze the accounts, got us investigated. Do you even realize what you're doing to your own family?" I stood straight, looking at my son as though he were a stranger. "Families don't steal," I said, "and no one gets investigated unless they've done something worth investigating." Melissa cut in, her tone slicing through the air like a blade drawn across glass. "You're being manipulated. That banker, Tom, right? He's just trying to profit off this. People love taking advantage of the elderly, Evelyn." I let out a short, dry laugh, humorless, hollow. "That line sounds familiar. I suppose I'm an elderly person being taken advantage of, just not by Tom." The air thickened. Ryan stepped forward, half a pace closer, anger and panic flickering in his eyes. "Mom, I'm your son. You can't treat me like some criminal." I replied, my voice calm enough to frighten even me. "If you want to be treated like my son, behave like one. But if you signed fraudulent authorizations to steal from me, you've chosen the other side." I caught the quick glance Melissa gave him, the faint curl at the corner of her lips. She always knew how to twist the knife while pretending it was compassion. "Evelyn," she said smoothly, "we didn't mean any harm. We just thought you weren't capable of managing everything yourself. Ryan only wanted to help. Help, I repeated. By draining my savings, buying diamond bracelets, and calling it a blessing? Her jaw tightened. She turned slightly away. You're talking like someone who's not well, she said under her breath. That sentence hit hard, not because it hurt, but because I recognized it. Gaslighting, just as Tom had warned. They would try to make me doubt my mind, my memory, even the evidence in front of me. I looked at Ryan. Do you really believe I'm losing my mind? Because someone not well doesn't uncover forged authorizations, contact the bank, and set up a legal trust. He avoided my eyes. Fists clenched. Mom, you're blowing this out of proportion. I don't want this going to court. You should have thought of that before taking my password, I answered, voice sharp as glass. The room went still. Melissa's patience cracked first. Fine, she snapped. If you want to make this ugly, we won't just sit here. Our lawyer says, given your age, it's entirely possible to challenge your mental competency. The blood in my veins turned cold. That wasn't a threat. It was a declaration of war. They meant to paint me as mentally unfit, to legitimize their theft. I stayed silent for a moment. Not out of fear, but to stop myself from laughing. Because right then, I realized something. They truly believed I was still the woman who could be led by the hand into her own undoing. Thank you for the suggestion, I said evenly. But I've already met with my attorney. And while you're hiring people to prove I'm incompetent, I have an entire bank ready to testify otherwise. Ryan froze. Melissa's jaw tightened. They hadn't expected me to go this far. I stepped toward the door and opened it. Get out of my house. Now. Ryan stared at me, a storm of anger and confusion in his eyes. Do you really want this, Mom? I don't want it, I said. But I have to. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood there, one hand on the door, my voice steady, almost gentle. You chose money over me. Now live with that choice. Melissa spun around, her heels striking the floor like small explosions. Fine, you'll regret this. She tugged Ryan's arm. He hesitated for just a second, then followed. As the door closed, the faint click of metal echoed, and I felt my heartbeat return after a long, hollow week. I locked the door, then added the deadbolt. Not because I feared they'd come back, but because, for the first time, I was locking it for myself. I stood alone in the living room. The warm light trembled across my hands, shaking, then steadying. Everything was silent, but this silence didn't crush me. It wrapped around me like a shield. I made tea and sat in the old chair. The file lay on the table. Evidence, statements, notes. Each page whispered the same thing. You didn't break. I thought of Tom, of Miss Weber preparing the case. I knew more storms were coming. They would fight back, lie, twist, and try to turn the victim into the villain. But I also knew, this time, they'd be facing a different Evelyn. I took a deep breath. In the rising steam of my tea, my reflection looked back. Same face, but the eyes no longer afraid. I whispered, almost like a prayer. This time, no one takes anything from me again. Not money, not dignity, not me. I set down the cup. The clock ticked steadily. The sound of that knock still echoed faintly. But it no longer threatened. It sounded like an opening note, the beginning of a new chapter in my life. One where I would not only resist, but reclaim. They say justice is light. But to me, when it finally appeared, that light was cold and white, blinding, like the lamp on Mr. Weber's desk. Our first meeting took place in a small office on the sixth floor of an old building. Pale gray walls, shelves packed with thick folders, and a gleaming brass plaque that read, David Weber, attorney at law. Weber was a thin, silver-haired man whose calm, even voice carried quiet authority. He read through the documents Tom had sent, then looked up at me. Mrs. Evelyn, he said, I'll be blunt. This isn't just theft. It's a felony. Elder financial abuse. In Oregon, it's a criminal offense. I sat up straighter, my hands clasped on the table. The word felony tightened something in my chest. I'd never imagined myself sitting in a lawyer's office, discussing pressing charges against my own son. But truth doesn't need emotion. It only needs to be spoken. I don't want them in prison, I said slowly. I just want back what's mine. Weber nodded. You're entitled to that. But to reclaim justice, sometimes the road is long and cold. He opened the file, pointing to each section: complaint form, transaction records, authorization copies, recorded calls from the bank. Tom's work was so thorough that Weber couldn't hide his surprise. These documents are strong enough to open a criminal case, he said. But before we do, you need to understand, your son and daughter-in-law will strike back. They'll deny everything. They'll claim you're confused, that you lack mental capacity. I gave a thin, brief smile. They've already started. He tilted his head. Evidence? I told him about the night of the knocking, the way Melissa called me senile, the way Ryan said, "You don't understand what family means." Weber nodded, jotting notes. Classic. Their next move will be to petition for a competency evaluation, trying to prove you were unfit when you signed the new documents. If they succeed, everything you've done, the trust, the complaint, could be voided. My chest filled, not with fear, but with anger. They want to make me a victim twice, I said. Once by taking my money, once by stripping my dignity. Exactly, Weber replied. But we have the advantage. Medical records, testimony from the bank, your handwritten notes, recordings, emails, they won't win easily. He slid a sheet of paper across the table. At the top, in bold, Elder Financial Abuse, Class B felony. Below were the penalties, 2 to 10 years in prison, depending on the amount stolen. I read each line, my fingers cold. Every word felt carved into me. Deception, coercion, exploitation of an elder's trust for financial gain. I signed beneath, authorization to initiate preliminary investigation. The ink spread softly, like a thread of blood in water. That afternoon, Weber called Tom in so we could plan together. 3 people, around one table, a 70-year-old woman, a banker and a lawyer, discussing how to fight 2 people who once called me Mom. Weber said, Mrs. Evelyn, you'll need to be strong. This will get ugly. They'll lie. They might cry. But if you stay rational, we'll win. Tom added, I'll coordinate with legal to supply identity verification logs, phone records, and notarized copies of the authorization forms. I sat quietly, watching them both. In that small room, for the first time in months, I felt not alone. I had allies, I had a plan, I had purpose. That evening, when I returned home, an unmarked envelope waited in my mailbox. Inside, a folded note, written in hurried strokes. Mom, please stop before this goes too far. You don't understand everything. No signature, but I knew the handwriting. I didn't tear it up. I tucked it into the folder labeled Miller, Evidence, and wrote beside it, Sign of Fear. The next morning, Weber called. Ryan and Melissa's lawyer, Someone named Connor Blake had filed a motion for a mental capacity review. I wasn't surprised. I just asked, "When?" "Next week. You'll meet a court-appointed psychologist." "Good," I said. "I'll bring my memory with me." That week, I reread everything. Statements, emails, notes. I rewrote each date, each detail, as though preparing for the most important exam of my life. I wasn't afraid of their questions. I was afraid of being mistaken for a fool, simply because I was old. The evaluation took place in a bright, sterile room. The psychologist asked me the date, the names of people I knew, recent events, and why I'd filed the complaint. I answered clearly, evenly, each word precise as a needle. When it was over, she smiled. "Mrs. Evelyn, your memory's sharper than many younger clients I see." When Weber received the report, he called immediately. "You passed. They can't use that tactic anymore." I exhaled, light as if a weight had slipped off my chest. A few days later, the preliminary report was filed with the Multnomah County Court. For the first time, the phrase elder financial abuse appeared in a public document, followed by two names, Ryan Miller and Melissa Miller. Looking at the printed page didn't hurt as I'd imagined. It simply felt just. That evening, while reviewing my notes, the phone rang. Ryan's voice trembled on the other end. "Mom, did you really do this? Do you want me to go to prison?" I paused, then spoke quietly. "I don't want anything. I just want things put back where they belong." "You're destroying this family." "No, Ryan. The family destroyed itself the day you set a password on your mother's account." I hung up. My hand didn't shake. Outside, the wind slipped through the window frame, carrying a chill. But inside, I felt warm, because, at last, I had chosen courage over fear. I closed the notebook and looked out the window. Moonlight spilled across the floor, shining on my wrinkled but steady hands. And in that pale glow, I whispered, "They can question my memory, but they will never silence my mind." Tomorrow, I'll meet with Weber again. This fight has only begun, but for the first time, I feel at peace. Not because I'm safe, but because I'm standing on the side of truth. When someone who's used to controlling you suddenly realizes you no longer obey, they don't retreat. They attack again. This time with papers, with words, with something dressed up as "for your own good." I knew that moment would come. I just didn't expect it to arrive so soon. That afternoon, as I was making tea, the doorbell rang. 3 deliberate, heavy chimes. I opened the door. 2 men stood on the porch, Ryan and a stranger in a gray suit with slicked back hair and the look of someone who can smell power. He introduced himself. "I'm Connor Blake, legal counsel for the Miller family." The Miller family. Hearing that name from his mouth left a bitter taste. That family used to be mine. Now it was a client file. I didn't invite them in. I simply stepped aside and said, "You can speak quickly. I don't have much time for strangers." He smiled, all courtesy. "We're just here for a small matter, to make sure your assets and rights are managed properly." Ryan stood behind him, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the floor, silent. Connor opened his briefcase and drew out a neatly clipped stack of papers. "This is a power of attorney form," he said smoothly. "A standard procedure. So you can appoint a trusted representative to manage affairs on your behalf. At your age, it's the safest way to avoid unnecessary risks." I looked at the document in his hand. The first page read clearly, "Principal, Evelyn Carter. Agent, Ryan Miller." The final line, blank, waited for my signature. I didn't need to read further. I recognized the shape of control when I saw it. Once I signed, Ryan could withdraw money, sell the house, even decide the fate of my late husband's estate. I set the papers down gently, but my voice came out cold as ice. Mr. Blake, are you aware that general powers of attorney are one of the most common tools used to defraud the elderly? He smiled, patient and oily. I understand your concern, ma'am, but this is your son. Everything here is perfectly legal and in your best interest. I sat down, eyes locked on him. Legal doesn't always mean right. And my son, the one who already emptied my savings, now wants more power. How fascinating. Ryan finally spoke, his voice tight with a mix of fear and anger. Mom, I don't want to argue. I just want you to be safe. Seeing you with lawyers, letting that banker Tom manipulate you, it breaks my heart. I met his eyes. Breaks your heart? You drained my account, Ryan. If you had a heart to break, it should have cracked the day you signed that fraudulent authorization. The room thickened with silence. Connor stayed composed, adjusting his tie like a lecturer calming unruly students. Mrs. Carter, he said evenly, if you don't sign, this tension will only escalate. Having a legal representative could resolve everything peacefully. And forgive me for being direct, but you seem under considerable emotional strain. I gave a small, dry laugh. I just passed a court-appointed competency evaluation. The report is filed with Mr. Weber's office. Would you like a copy? He hesitated, then forced a smile. I only want to spare everyone further trouble. I stood, took the document from the table, and walked slowly toward the trash bin by the window. You're right, I said softly. Trouble only comes from keeping what should be thrown away. Then I opened the lid and dropped the entire stack in. The sound, a single, crisp rustle, cut through the air like a blade. The room held its breath. I turned back, voice steady, each word edged in steel. The only power you have, Mr. Blake, is the power to turn around and leave my house. And you. I looked at Ryan. Stop using the word mother as a weapon to trigger my pity. Ryan's mouth opened, but Connor was faster. Mrs. Carter, this is unwise. At your age, my age, I interrupted, is not an excuse for stupidity. I know exactly what I'm doing, and I need no representative other than myself. I walked to the door and opened it. Cold wind rushed in, scattering a few loose pages from Connor's case. Leave, I said quietly, but my tone carried the weight of a closing door. Now. Connor studied me for a few seconds, then turned to Ryan. Let's go. Ryan didn't move. He stood there, eyes bloodshot, lips trembling. Mom, I never meant to hurt you. I just thought. You thought I was weak, I said. That I'd sign because I feared your anger. That age would make me too timid to fight. You were wrong. Tears welled at the corners of his eyes, but I didn't step forward. I didn't comfort him. Love without boundaries becomes a chain, and I had cut mine. At last, Ryan lowered his head and followed Connor out. When the sound of their car engine faded, I closed the door, locked the bolt. Once, twice, then again. Not out of fear they'd return, but to mark the boundary I'd finally drawn. I sat down and opened my notebook, hand trembling but firm. On a new page, I wrote, March 3rd. They came with a power of attorney. I refused. Not with anger, but with clarity. I set down the pen and poured more tea. Steam rose, reflecting my face in the curve of the cup. An elderly woman, silver hair, hands a little unsteady, but eyes bright, calm, alive. I had cried enough, feared enough, yielded enough. Now, only clarity remained. That night, an email arrived from Tom. Subject: Camera log, evidence 10. Inside was security footage from the bank. Ryan on the phone, instructing a teller to add his authorization. His face was calm, confident, without hesitation. I watched the clip for a long time, not to feed anger, but to erase illusion. I forwarded it to Weber with a short note. Additional evidence. I'm ready. Just 2 words. I'm ready. But as I typed them, a strange lightness filled me. Because power doesn't come from holding money or hiring lawyers. It comes from standing up, saying no, and not shaking when someone hates you for it. Before bed, I tidied my desk. Every document stacked, labeled, numbered. Each file now felt like a brick in a new wall of defense. I rested my hand on them, cold but solid. Outside, the wind rattled the bare branches. I whispered to myself, power isn't something you're given. It returns the moment you stop asking permission to exist. I blew out the candle. The room fell into darkness. But in that darkness, one thing was clear. I was the light. When someone used to controlling you realizes you're no longer obedient, they don't retreat. They strike again, this time with paperwork, with words, with something called for your own good. I knew it would come. I just didn't expect it to come so quickly. That afternoon, Oregon was fog dim. I got a call from Melissa while I was cutting flowers in the garden. Her voice trembled, straining for composure. Mom, I know this has gone too far. I want to make it right. Let's have dinner. Not to argue, just to talk. I was silent for a moment, listening to the rain on the eaves, each drop beating the tin roof like the heartbeat of someone about to confess. All right, I answered, briefly. No need to ask more. I knew the call wasn't born of love, but of fear. But sometimes you have to look straight into the fear of the person who once belittled you, so you can end it. I prepared not as if to see family, but as if for court. In my handbag, I arranged a brown envelope with everything inside. A copy of the bank's security camera video, detailed transfer statements, an audio recording of Ryan's call to the teller, and finally, a summary of personal debts provided by a private investigator. A slim dossier, but sharper than any knife I've ever held. I chose a charcoal gray sweater and a thin scarf. No perfume, no makeup. I no longer needed softness. Before leaving, I looked in the mirror. The woman there had bright, steady eyes. No trace of a victim, only a survivor. Ryan and Melissa's house sat on a small slope in the Portland suburbs. By the time I arrived, the yellow lights were on, the windows casting a warm glow like an ad for a happy family. I paused at the gate and took a deep breath. The smell of wet grass and cold earth mingled, the scent of truth about to be exposed. Melissa opened the door. Carefully done makeup, red lips, a trembling smile. Mom, I'm so glad you came. She stepped in to hug me, but I tilted aside, giving a brief nod. Ryan came out from the kitchen, shirt crisp, a trace of expensive cologne. Mom, I made your favorite, old-style pot roast. I remember you said it made you feel at home. I replied, food doesn't make a home, people do. The air stalled for a beat, then Melissa forced another smile. Please sit, I'll pour the wine. I sat in the main chair at the table. In front of me, white porcelain place settings, a floral tablecloth, scented candles, and a glass of red wine. Everything perfect, a carefully arranged stage. I looked at them. Ryan to my left, Melissa to my right. Both wore strained smiles, as if acting roles they didn't believe. Melissa spoke first. Mom, I know things have gone too far, but we're family. Families forgive, don't they? I took a small sip of wine, let the tannins spread across my tongue, then said, forgiving and forgetting aren't the same thing. Ryan cut in, voice softened as if rehearsed. I know I was wrong, Mom. I was just afraid people were using you. I've heard Tom and Mr. Weber are pushing you too far. You don't need lawsuits, right? We can end all this right here. I looked at him for a long time and saw not remorse, but calculation in my son's eyes. You're right, I said. This can end right here, if you both understand one thing. I took the handbag, slid out the brown envelope, and set it on the table. This is the gift I brought. Melissa stiffened, suspicion in her eyes. What is it? I pushed the envelope toward them, my voice oddly calm. Evidence. The bank's security footage, transfer statements, the call recording, and a summary of your debts. All verified by Attorney Weber. Ryan sat up straight, his face blanching. Are you threatening me? No, I said. I'm speaking in the language you understand best. Numbers. Melissa opened the envelope, her hands unsteady. I saw her lips move over a few lines, and then her expression changed. You hired a private investigator to follow us? I took another sip of wine. I hired someone to find the truth. You two made yourselves worth following. The air thickened. Candlelight flickered across their faces. Two people who once thought themselves clever, now facing evidence that couldn't be denied. I went on, slow and clear. I won't press charges if, from now on, you never touch my name, my accounts, or my life again. But if I receive even one more text, call, or email about money, I won't call Tom, I won't call Weber, I'll call the police. Ryan slapped the table. The wine glass shuddered, red as blood. You can't do that. You're tearing this family apart. Families don't steal, I answered. And no one has the right to say family after selling it for cash. Melissa gave a strained, half-sobbing, half-arguing laugh. You don't understand. We just wanted what's best for you. We're in debt. We needed help. Help isn't theft. If you'd asked, I might have helped. But you chose to take. I stood. The wooden chair scraped the floor with a dry, hard rasp. This isn't a meal, I said, low and final. This is our last supper. Ryan was silent. Melissa began to cry, tears cutting black streaks through her makeup. I looked at them, not with anger, but with a deep regret. I've forgiven you, I said quietly, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I picked up my bag and turned. Behind me, Ryan called softly, Mom, I'm sorry. I paused at the door without looking back. You're not saying sorry for me. You're saying it to lighten your guilt. But guilt, son, isn't lightened by words. I opened the door. Cold wind swept in. The candle on the table went out with a hiss, leaving a coil of white smoke in the air. My shadow stretched long across the floor, passing them like the last wisp of a dream. On the porch, I heard Melissa's choked sob, Ryan's fist thudding the table. I didn't turn around. The door closed behind me, soft but decisive, like a verdict delivered without a courtroom. I drove home through a fine misting rain. The road was dark and wet, but I saw more clearly than ever. No more illusions, no more what-ifs. Only one truth. I had taken myself back. At home, I brewed tea. The steam rose, twining with the scent of mint leaves until I felt cleansed. I opened my notebook and wrote the first line of a new chapter in my life. I met them again. not to hate, but to close the door. There are people we can only love until the day they start making us lose ourselves. After that, love must become a boundary. I shut the notebook and looked out of the window. The rain had stopped. The full moon shone, laying a silver light across the table. In that moment, I realized revenge isn't making others suffer. It's making them realize you no longer suffer because of them. I smiled and said softly, "They took my money, but I took back myself." And for the first time in a very long time, I slept without having to lock my heart. I once thought that collapse would come with an explosion, a scream, a fury of the earth and sky. But no, it came quietly, like ice melting, drip by drip, until the ground was flooded. And one morning, I realized they had begun to drown. After the Last Supper, my house suddenly felt bigger, brighter. Everything stood still in its place. The old chair, the teacup, the picture of my husband on the shelf. I no longer woke in the middle of the night, wondering what they would do next. Instead, I learned to breathe slower, tend to the garden, water the flowers, read books. I thought, perhaps, I was learning how to live again after an earthquake. But life always has a way of sending news faster than we expect. One morning, Tom called. "Evelyn, have you seen the news?" "What news, Tom?" "Ryan's company. They're conducting an internal investigation. Someone's reported him for suspicious transactions. The media is digging deep." I said nothing. I only looked out the window, where the maple trees were changing colors. The vibrant red made me feel cold. "I'm not happy, Tom," I said slowly. "But I understand. A person can't run forever from their own shadow." He was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "Maybe this is how justice works. Sometimes we don't have to lay a hand on it." That afternoon, the local news flashed on TV. CFO Ryan Miller suspended amid financial misconduct investigation. My son's face appeared for a moment, tired, hollow, eyes lost. I turned off the TV, not out of triumph, not out of pain, just a quiet feeling, like someone had closed the last chapter of a book I no longer wanted to read. A few days later, it was Melissa's turn. A friend sent me a link. Melissa Miller, customer fraud. Under the comments were hundreds of customers, once trusting her, now furious, demanding refunds. A life built on lies, needing no one to bring it down. It collapsed on its own. I sat on the porch, the tea cooling in my hands. The autumn air in Oregon smelled of cold, of fallen leaves, of things dissolving to return to the earth. In that scent, I saw my life, once betrayed, once shattered, now dissolving, only to begin growing again. I didn't call them. I didn't send letters. I didn't text. I just let silence do what every word had failed to do, force them to hear themselves. One evening, the phone rang, an unknown number. I wasn't going to answer, but something in my gut told me I should. The voice on the other end was hoarse, weak. "Mom, it's me, Ryan." I said nothing. "Mom, I don't know where to begin. I lost my job. Everyone's turned their back on me. Melissa, she left. I have nothing." I heard heavy breathing, then a pause. "I know you hate me, but I just want you to know. I understand now what it feels like to be betrayed." I spoke softly. "I don't hate you, Ryan. I just regret. I regret that you never chose honesty, even once, when you still had the chance." He cried. The sobs were real, no longer the arrogance of the past. "Mom, could you take back the lawsuit? If you don't, I'll lose everything." I sighed. "Son, what you've lost isn't because of me. You lost it because you took things that didn't belong to you. And now, you're learning the lesson I once learned, that paying the price isn't a punishment. It's the only way to return to being human. There was a long silence. I could hear the wind through the receiver, as though the distance between us was a century. "I'm sorry," he said softly, "not to be forgiven, but because I'm truly ashamed." I closed my eyes. "I know. And that's the first time in your life you've grown up." I didn't cry. I only felt the hot tears fall, as if they were washing away all the old things. A few days later, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address, just a few trembling lines. To Mom. Inside was a handwritten letter. The ink was smudged in places, probably from tears or rain. I opened it and read slowly, each line like an echo from the past. "Mom, I don't know if you'll read this. I'm staying at a friend's place in Spokane for now. I'll look for a new job. I don't dare ask for your forgiveness. I just hope you know that I truly regret everything. When I lost everything, I finally understood what you lost because of me. I miss the way you made tea. I miss the kitchen. I miss hearing you call my name. I no longer hope to be your son again. I just hope that one day you'll look at the sunrise without feeling sad when you think of me. Ryan." I folded the letter. No tears, no anger, only a lightness, like after the rain, when the earth softens, the sky clears, and you know you've walked the path you needed to walk. I placed the letter in a small wooden box, labeled "Lessons I Had to Pay For." In it, I kept everything, from bank statements to bits of handwritten notes, like a silent museum of my life. A month later, I heard Melissa had filed for divorce. She moved back to her mother's house, selling off belongings to pay off debts. People said she had lost weight, stayed home more. As for Ryan, no one knew. Some said he was working odd jobs somewhere in eastern Washington. I didn't search, because I knew when a person is punishing themselves, they don't need anyone else to condemn them. I started teaching a class on financial protection for older women at the community center. Each week, about 20 women came. They were like me, once deceived, once lost, once belittled. I taught them how to read contracts, how to set passwords, how to say no to those they loved, and I always ended the class with one line: "We are not weak because we love. We are only weak when love clouds our judgment." Each time I spoke, I saw a small light in the eyes of those women. The same light I once thought had forever burned out in myself. One evening, while tidying up the room, I accidentally found the old box with some photographs. Inside was one picture: Ryan, smiling, arm around my husband, with Melissa standing next to them, holding a birthday cake. I stared at the picture for a long time. Ryan's eyes in the photo were innocent, proud. I gently touched the frame and whispered, "If there's a next life, I only hope to meet you again at this moment, when you're still the son I once took pride in." I placed the picture back and closed the box. No anger, no tears. Only acceptance. The only thing that can truly set you free. By the end of fall, when the maple leaves littered the porch, I realized I no longer thought about them every day. The silence in the house no longer felt heavy, but soft. In the mornings, I still brewed tea, read books, taught the small class at the center. In the evenings, I listened to old jazz music, wrote a few lines in my journal, and every time I heard the wind outside the window, I remembered Mr. Weber's words. Justice isn't always fast, but it always comes. He was right. But I learned something else. Forgiveness isn't about erasing someone else's wrongs. It's about stopping it from controlling your life. I wrote on the last page of that year's journal, I lost money. I lost my son. But I found myself. And that was the most worthwhile investment of my life. Time has a strange way of healing. It doesn't erase the pain, nor does it make you forget, but it helps you learn to see the pain in a different light. 1 year had passed since I locked the door after the Last Supper. My life now felt as calm as the surface of a lake in the morning. No more unexpected calls, no more knocking at the door with demands, and no more restless sleep. Every morning, I brewed a cup of peppermint tea, opened the window to let the Oregon sunlight pour in, and listened to the sparrows singing on the porch. Sometimes I still thought, peace is the most expensive gift you only receive after losing everything else. I began teaching a class on financial protection for older women at the small community center in town. The first session had only 8 people, but now the class had nearly 30. I didn't teach from books. I told them my own story. A 70-year-old woman who once believed that love alone could protect her from all harm. I told them about the empty accounts, the sleepless nights, and the moment I realized that trust didn't always mean safety. Whenever I spoke, the class went silent. Some had tears in their eyes, others bowed their heads, while some wrote down every word. I told them, we are not weak because we love. We are only weak when love clouds our judgment. When you learn to say no, it's not selfish, it's self-respect. I looked into their eyes and saw the light I once lost, the light of clarity. After each session, they often stayed behind, took my hand, and said, "Thank you, Evelyn. Because of you, I no longer feel ashamed for trusting the wrong person." I would just smile and reply, "I was once like you." But we can't let our past mistakes stop us from living better. One autumn afternoon, when the class ended, I returned home. The sunset stretched across the maple-lined street, the wind cool and fragrant with the scent of wet earth. In my mailbox, I found a white envelope, no return address. On the front, neat handwriting, "To Mom." I stood for a long while before opening it. My heart no longer fluttered, only a quiet feeling, as though I was about to read a final chapter whose ending I already knew. Inside, there was a handwritten letter. The paper was yellowed, the writing a little shaky, and the ink smudged in places, either from tears or rain. I opened it and read slowly. Each line felt like an echo from the past. "Mom, if you're reading this, it means I finally gathered the courage to write. I've gone far, not to run away, but to find myself. I'm working on a small farm in Idaho. I wake up at 5 in the morning, work the land, feed the cattle, and sleep before night fully falls. For the first time, I understand the value of sweat, something I only knew how to spend before. I miss you. I miss the kitchen that smelled of cinnamon, and I miss the teacup you always placed by the window. Mom, I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you know that every day I live, I carry with me the lesson you taught me. Never take what doesn't belong to you, not even trust. I love you." Ryan, I finished reading and sat still. A single tear fell onto my hand, warm and light like dew. Not tears of regret, but of release. I folded the letter and placed it in the small wooden box on the table, the one I had labeled "Lessons I Had to Pay For." Inside, there were already so many keepsakes. Bank statements, investigation papers, an old photo of Ryan at 10, smiling in the sunlight, and now this letter. Each item was a wound, but at the same time, they were proof of my strength. That evening, I sat outside, brewing a fresh cup of tea. The moonlight shone like silver, casting a calm glow over the garden. I remembered my husband, who once taught me that trust is the thread that connects all the good things in life. Back then, I believed that thread would never break. Now, I understand. It can break, but you can still tie it back together, just at a different end with yourself. I looked up at the sky, whispering as if he were sitting beside me. Do you see? I'm okay now. I don't hate them anymore. Because if I kept holding on to hatred, I'd be no different from them. Except that I'd hide the knife better. I smiled. A real smile. The first one in many years. Not because I was happy, but because I finally understood. Forgiveness isn't about giving. It's about letting go. The next day in class, a student asked me, Evelyn, if your son comes back, would you accept him? I smiled, answering slowly. If he comes back with honesty, I'll open the door. But if he comes back with lies, I'll only turn on the light so he can see the way forward. The whole class fell silent, then burst into laughter. Not because it was funny, but because they understood. It was the laughter of someone who had fallen to the lowest point, but still knew how to rise. In December, I was invited to speak at a seminar on financial safety for older adults. When I stood on the stage, I looked at the hundreds of people below. Silver hair, kind smiles, tired eyes, but full of resolve. I began with my own story and ended with words I knew would be the message of my life. You can't stop others from being cruel, but you can stop them from taking the keys to your life. Learn to protect yourself, both in your wallet and your heart, because sometimes we are the ones who open the door for someone else to walk in and destroy us. Close that door, not out of fear, but because you understand the value of peace. The entire room stood and applauded. I bowed, and in that moment, I knew all the losses, all the lonely nights, all the tears had meant something. That evening, when I returned home, I sat down at my desk. Outside the window, the first snowflakes of the season began to fall. I opened my notebook and wrote the final line of my life story. I once lost everything: money, family, trust. But from the ashes of it all, I found the most important thing: myself. They took my money, but I took back myself. I set the pen down, took a deep breath. Outside, the dawn began to break over the snow-covered rooftops. The first light of a new day shone through the window frame, casting a glow on my hands. They no longer trembled. They were warm, steady, as if the life had gently greeted me, telling me, it's time to keep living. There are some forms of revenge that don't require bloodshed, nor do they demand a victory. All we need to do is stand up, calmly, and say one thing clearly: I will no longer allow you to hurt me. Evelyn didn't shoot anyone. She didn't bring anyone down. She simply chose to live better and allowed her own peace to be the most beautiful response to every betrayal. Because sometimes, what haunts others the most isn't punishment, but the realization that, even after they took everything from us, we still stand firm and smile. Perhaps that is the ultimate peak of a revenge story. Not to make others feel the pain we once endured, but to make sure we no longer hurt because of them. If you've ever experienced loss, been betrayed, or simply had to learn how to rise after pain, leave a sincere word of sharing. You don't need to say much, just one sentence, one memory, one feeling. because sometimes sharing is the first step toward healing.